So I'm Garrett Hack, and I'm coming to you from Abundance Farm in Vermont. We're in the center of the state, where I've been living for the last 43 years. I bought this land in the late 70s. And this is my shop that I'm in right now. I'm going to give you a quick tour of it later on, but I thought I'd introduce just how I work and what I've worked on over the years. I've been lucky enough to do very high-end commission work over the years. It didn't start out that way, of course. I did a lot of architectural things and even did a few kitchens and that kind of thing, and then slowly built up to doing now one-of-a-kind pieces, and still doing 3 or 4 pieces a year, I would say. I've slowed down a little bit, but not all that much. And I'm still farming. I have a few cows and a workhorse, and we grow a big garden and field crops and that kind of thing. I'd like to introduce, I'd like this to be a discussion if possible. I'm glad to entertain questions if people want to speak up and it's not going to be disruptive to the flow. I can handle this question of how it's going to work with this particular Zoom. But I show you, what I've been doing and explain some of the things about those pieces, and then maybe an introduction into how they came about in terms of how did I develop the ideas and that kind of thing. So most of them are commissions, although for the last 20 some years, I've been part of a group of furniture makers in New Hampshire, centered mostly in New Hampshire. We call ourselves as the Furniture Masters, and I'm the token Vermonter and past president, so they value me. And we had an auction every year, and that was an incredible opportunity to make a speculative piece and put it out there and see how it would do. And could I sell it, and could I sell it for a good price? And most of the time I was successful. So Greg, if you'd start with the images, we can just click through here, and there's gonna be questions at the end if not during my presentation. So these are pieces that span quite a lot of years, but I'll explain what they are. This is where I am. It's a shop that I built starting in 1993. My wife said, you got to get out of the house. We have 5 kids, or did have 5 kids. They're all grown up now. And I really wanted to build a piece a shop that was a showpiece for my work. And it really has proven to be that. So it's old brick, granite. I wanted to learn how to cut granite. It's got a slate roof I put on. And I built everything. We have a house and 2 barns, and I built everything over the 44 years I've been here now. Next. So this is a early piece, I would say, not so early, but is this the next one in order? Okay, probably is. Okay. So this is a little piece called Little Shaker, L-I-L apostrophe L. And I name all the pieces because I think it gives them a certain kind of personality. This is Curly Birch. This is an early piece that I had in the auction. And it's based on a shaker designs, which is really the early influence. You can see the sort of the shaker influence of the legs and the under bevel on the top. And this little drawer is sort of a fun thing that I add. A lot of my pieces have little fun drawers. I want to make work that really is fun. And so the shakers were an obvious influence because I live in an area where there was a lot of shaker influence. There's still a big community in New Hampshire, Canterbury, New Hampshire. No shakers left there, but an incredible resource for aesthetics to learn about the shakers. So next. This is the next iteration of that piece. And that piece I just showed you had symmetry, which was very typical of the shakers, although they did use asymmetry. This has got asymmetry going on, which is an interesting design challenge that I like. It's got the similar kinds of legs. It's made out of curly birch, which is a beautiful native wood. I mostly work in native woods. And over the 40 plus years I've been doing furniture making, I've been harvesting woods off of our land. And there's a lot of wood here to be harvested, plus there's a lot of woods around. So I got friendly with loggers, and if they had a curly birch or a curly maple or whatever, it was easy to get it and just hire a sawmill in every year and saw it up. I don't need to do that anymore because I've got such a backlog of wood. So this piece originated, actually, an interesting starting point was my wife was looking for some fabric and things in a very fancy store. Uh, and it had all these beautiful buttons. And I found these little thin blue glass buttons. Now you can't see them, and I don't have any better picture to show you, but inlaid into the ends of the knobs with these little glass buttons with where the two little thread holes would have been to sew them on. I made two little teeny brass tacks. So what it really comes down to is the inspiration for this was there. Also the shaker work, obviously, there's the sort of where I was, you don't sort of come up with new ideas right off the bat. They have to be sort of evolved through past work and the like. But it does exemplify what I think about when I'm designing something, which is that I wanted a piece that had a certain presence across the room. And I think the wood alone kind of draws you to it. The asymmetry, maybe the arrangement of the drawers is a little unusual, the shape of the legs. And when you get closer, you start to understand things on sort of the second level. And that's when you start to see the shaping of the legs. You see there's a little incised ring at the swelling point there, sort of at the knee, you might call it. And you start to see other details. And then the third level is when you really notice one day, oh my God, there's a little glint of blue on these buttons. And they're actually septagonal, which is kind of interesting. They're faceted, those septagonal pulls. And that's, again, something you notice. You notice when you touch it. You notice it when you pull a drawer out that there's a chamfer around the inside edge of it a certain way. And these are all things that I like that are very intimate, sort of this third level of knowing a piece. So next. So I did a whole series of these Demi Loon tables. I was getting more inspired by federal furniture at this point. And I would say this is sort of my mature federal furniture style, even though I built this table probably in about 1995 or something like that, or 1998. And this was one of the first auction pieces I put up. And it's got federal square tapered legs, and it's got these little, what I call soldiers, a little cuff band around the bottom of the legs, a string inlay coming down it, and I had a box that I attached to the top. And it was the first time that I signed my name in Morse code with dots and dashes of ebony and holly, black and white. And I think it's, as I said before, I really try to add fun to my work, but I think this is a nice added feature. So next. And you can see here how it's easy to put, messages, dots and dashes into something if you, like these panels. This is white birch crotch, plume birch it's often called. So I'm just going into the woods and finding a tree with a crotch in it and cutting it out. You need to have small crotches to do something of this scale. But what I'm also playing with here is the energy of the changing dimension of the black versus the white. It's almost a little bit like a marquee on a movie theater, the way the lights travel around and sort of draw your eye around and around. And going back to the Morse code idea, I also put my name in Morse code. Since it's hack, it's four letters. It's pretty easy. I can put a little line along one side of a panel, like the right side of a panel. I can do an H, and the next panel, the next leg A, C, K. So I like to kind of fool around with the curators of the future. So coming back to this third level is kind of understanding a piece, the sort of the subtlety and the depth of what I'm trying to design into it, is the underbevel of the top is now a cove. So you maybe go to feel it one day and say, oh, this isn't a bevel at all. This is a curved, undercurved shape here. And then I've got this little cock bead, that little ebony bead that's running under the panel and under the apron that goes all the way around. Again, all these different ways to sort of draw your eye and have it explore the piece. It's not something you kind of, you see a rectilinear piece and you sort of understand it at one go, but here you've got this elliptical shape with all these different kinds of decorations going on in the legs. So next. So the next iteration of that kind of a piece was a three-legged piece. This is called Taken a Shine. And this is, again, was an auction piece. And I studied in Boston in the late 70s with Jerry Osgood and several other people that came through. And it was an incredible program for 2 years for me, because I already had an undergraduate degree. I didn't need to do any more education. I wanted to learn how to be a furniture maker. And I learned how to do metalworking. I made hardware and I made tools and all kinds of things, because the school had the ability to do that. It was called Program in Artisanry at Boston University. And so these have silver legs, this piece, these sort of saber rosewood legs with silver tips on the ends of them, and 7 drawers across the facade. I'll show you a close-up of that. And then this case that gets deeper towards the back of Macassar ebony, that striped brown and black Macassar ebony. Quite a small piece, but quite dynamic. Next. And here you can see the silver feet. It's this silver plate sort of wrapped around the leg and formed into it. And it's hard, maybe hard to see, but there's a chamfer that runs up the toe all the way up into the leg and up all the way up the leg. And I say you can feel the difference in temperature, but you can't feel the difference in you know, as one melds into the other. And the chamfer sort of just defines that edge where they come together. Next. So here's that 7th drawer. And the pulls too, by the way, have little silver dots in the end of them, and they also are septagonal. It just seems like a pull that I've used a number of times. I like it. It's light and it's fun and it works. So that drawer was a challenge. The little drawer can come out, the big drawer that's surrounded can come out, and neither one of them interrupts the other. And that's the trick when you're going to build these things, to make it so that it really works, and you know, just pull one drawer and the other one comes out with it. So it takes a lot of engineering, and that's where I do drawings. I do full-scale drawings, and I do mock-ups and things, which I'll show you when we get to the end. Next. So the next year, it turned out the neighbors were bidding against that piece, taking a shine, and the neighbors came back the following year. They didn't win the piece, and they said, would you build us another piece? So I did. I built a piece with gold legs and gold toes and that kind of thing. And this is done a little differently. I formed up copper to form the sleeve sort of on the end of the leg. I turned balls on my little machinist lathe, soldered them all together and smoothed them all up and cleaned them all up, and then sent them out to be gold plated. Obviously not going to make this out of gold. And then because they were going to come back and they were going to be put onto the legs, I knew I couldn't adjust them at all. I just had to go with what it was. I put a little bead of ivory around the bottom. This is all recycled ivory. I use old piano keys. This happens to be a piece of an old piece of jewelry box or something someone gave me once upon a time. So I made a little bead there. And again, it's just an enhancing detail, but it's quite subtle. It's, you know, low down on the floor. So next. And this is the piece. It's called Wakiwa Shimmering. It was, this was just a straight commission. And this is the first time on the left side that I made drawers that spin out. These 2 drawers spin out, which is actually quite challenging to do, that the drawers can open that way and close, and they don't sag or anything like that. And then 2 little doors. And the idea of it is, it has to do with water, sunlight glinting on water. So often the idea of what am I trying to build here? What's the design, the kernel of where the design comes from. In this case, it was just watching the sunlight on water. So that facade is curly birch, but it's also bent into those ripples across the facade. That's a lamination technique. Next. And this is where that lamination technique went in another piece. This is called Ripplicious, and it's a desk. We might be looking at the back, we might be looking at the front. I've never figured it out. The back side, or the side we can't see, has 6 drawers. I think of it as a desk. And it's playing with, again, this rippling actually laminated into those shapes. And I've been asked, well, why didn't you just carve it? Well, if you carve it, you get a very different grain pattern than using straight grained wood. And someone asked a question, I'm sorry, I couldn't catch it. But using straight grain wood, you know, along a laminated surface, the grain's going to be straight grained and flowed, and that doesn't have the sort of topographic map that you get when you start to carve away through the grain. So this was a single plank of pear, sawed off veneers off the top of it, and with a bandsaw, the big Wood-Mizer bandsaw, and used all the veneers to make the laminations, and then the facade of the drawers is all solid, the small pieces that were left. Next. So here you get a sense of that ripple. So I talked earlier about the shaker, one piece leading to the next, and I think it's very much that's the case for me, that, you know, one piece is sort of says, oh, I can do this. Let's try that next time. And what I learned from doing this piece was the ripples on the apron and the ripples on the top, into the top, they don't have to align. They just have to relate to each other. They have to be similar enough that you have a sense that there's some relationship to them. But actually, when they're not the same, it's more interesting that there's a little sort of a pattern of the two of them that are going in somewhat of harmony, but not in exactly the same. Next. So this was the one piece that of the 18 or so that I put up for auction that did not sell at the auction right away. It's called Vava Vienna. And for a dozen years, I was going to Germany to teach woodworking. I've been all over Europe to teach, but this came out of a trip to Germany and then on to Vienna, which my wife and I always did because we were in Europe. So why not spend an extra week or two somewhere else and get in, see art and see design and see architecture. So this is inspired by that trip to Vienna. So it's got this sort of high style look about it. It stands about as tall as I am, a little taller. And it's a Mortiser veneer on the facade. That's shops on veneer. I almost never buy veneer, I always make it. And it's a coopered form, it's coopered cherry. So it's built like a boat with this facade on the front. I've got little silver legs. And then my wife painted on the facade. We said, let's do something really bold. And she's a painter and sculptor. And so we experimented with it. So next. And here you get a little sense of it. It's sort of wild with pattern, and it's not wild enough. Looking at it now in retrospect, it could be even wilder, wrapped around the piece even more. There's a band of satin wood at the top, and then there's this tiara at the top of mother of pearl and ebonized cherry, making it a very, very high style as they would have used those sort of materials in Vienna. So it's a 4-door cabinet, which the top opens up. It could be a bar. It could be a display case for some special collections, or it could be for your ancestors, pictures of your ancestors. So you can close it up and have it be private. And then the down below has got some drawers and storage space. I did sell it subsequently to someone who really loves it. That's the most important thing. But it was interesting that it got very, very close to the reserve. I almost never had a reserve at the auction, but this year I did. And that probably should have sold it the first night, but I didn't. Next. So that piece was coopered. This is coopered. This piece is curly birch again. It's really a fascinating wood to me. It's extremely difficult to work. It's got such interlocked grain, and it's just terrible to try and smooth with planes. But you can. So this has got a swell to it. And the staves are all coved with these little dark beads at the apex of each cove. I'll show you a sample of that. I've got a sample of my bench here. And it was a small piece, but just a little side cabinet to, sofa or a bedside cabinet or whatever it is. And the facade, I don't know if this is a picture. Next, please. Let's see, Greg, I think there might be a picture. Yes. The facade is satin wood, and it's 3 little drawers and a little cabinet door. So it's really kind of a piece of sculpture, challenging piece to build, but that's sort of where I am in my career at this point. I'm interested to do these kinds of pieces that are, have got technical challenges or aesthetic challenges. And it's fun for me to do that. Next. So this was the most extraordinary piece that I'd ever done. It was a commission. Basically, it was one of these commissions where the client had bought my work before, believed in me, and said, just go for it, make an incredible piece, and we don't care what it is, and we don't care when we get it, show it, and that kind of thing. This is called Outside In, and it actually turned out to be less fun than I would have liked. It took me several years of making pieces to try out the ideas before I actually started this one. I had to do a full-scale mock-up of it. Now, so far I've been working with scale drawings or full-scale drawings or mock-up of little pieces of a part or patterns, but rarely do I do a whole full-scale mock-up because it's just too time-consuming. But this one had a big enough budget. and is complex enough. So the client wanted some secret compartments and different kinds of things. So I sort of threw a lot of things at it. There's 2 different doors. There's 3 little drawers at the right side, 4 little drawers, no, 3 little drawers on the right side that open up. And they actually are a combination lock. You've got to open those a certain amount in a certain order to open the door below. And there's also a little drawer that comes out through the door below. So you can get the drawer without the door being open, but you've got to get into the cavity of the door, you've got another combination lock. And then there's a little timbre there, the curly birch timbre. My wife did some painting. I forget how many secret compartments there are, but there's several, maybe a half a dozen. And then there's some places where it takes 2 or 3 different levels to get into the deepest part of it. I call it levels of encryption. I think there's several places where you've got to go through 4 levels of encryption to get into the center of it, which again is just interesting and fun because I love secret compartments. So next. So here it is closed up, and you can see the little drawer on the right side near the bottom there. You see the blue of this beautiful texture on the door. It's a little incised area. And my wife painted this beautiful texture there. And it's got this, sort of a form. It's all coopered again, these individual staves, different widths of them, and some of them taper to create the shape. And then this sort of high style again, conclusion to the piece at the top, where it doesn't go out as a lot of pieces do, but it steps in. Next. And you get a sense at the top there's a Morse code message that goes all the way around the top of it. It's not a very private message. It just basically is the name of the piece, the date, and my name. Took up a lot of real estate to do that. And then there's a lot of little drawers that come out of different places. The little drawer on the left there is a curved drawer. As John Binzen described it on the back cover of Fine Woodworking a couple of issues ago, he said it comes out like a little choo-choo train. Well, I thought that was really the best description so far, the little curved drawer. And once I figured out how to do it, it wasn't that difficult, but you got to obviously have a little curved compartment for it and that kind of thing. And then 3 little drawers on the right there. And I tried to use 15 or so native woods. This went to New Hampshire, so I used all kinds of native woods, sassafras and butternut, and the overall case is Douglas fir, which is obviously not native, but I did use a lot of other natives. Next. So this is a piece I'm going to show you, but you're never going to be able to see this without the top missing. And this piece has got 12 drawers. It's a desk. It's called pahele, which means puzzle in Hindi. I made it for a Hindi young man from his father. And it's a piece that hopes his son's gonna have with him the rest of his life. But what I'm showing you is some of the secrets inside of this piece. There are 3 secret drawers, and there are 5 secret compartments. And the program was, since this young man is a chess prodigy and musician and mathematician, his father's a scientist, so he follows along in that. The father said, make them really, really hard to find. So they are, I think, but I think with time he'll find them, but they're hard. And some of them have to go through, again, 2 or 3 levels of encryption to get to the inner parts of where some of these secret drawers are. And I even left some false clues, like a little knob in some places where he thinks he can pull the knob and open something, but nothing opens. And I put a spring behind the knob, so the knob feels like you're turning it and something's happening, but nothing's happening. So this is what it looks like if you look down inside, and this is the cavities where some of the secret compartments are. The big white boxes are the sets of drawers. There's 5 drawers in the back, and there's 5 drawers in the front, and then a series of drawers down below those. So next. So I thought it'd be easier to show you these in a photograph than to show you the actual drawings. They're right on my bench right now. This is the piece I've been working on, and I'm getting very, very close to the end. It's a scale drawing, and I do really good scale drawings. And I find if I do good drawings, I can really see the proportion of things. I can see, all the way the different elements and scale of parts all relate to each other. It's an interesting commission. It's a table with a glass top, inset glass top, and it's got 15 drawers that 12 of them store these very special folding knives that this man collects. He has 350. His wife thinks he might have 500 in some day, so she's commissioned it from me. And the idea of it is that the drawers are all lined with black felt. There's a divider down the length of each drawer. And the bottom drawers, the three wider drawers at the bottom, or deeper drawers, I should say, are for putting things like boxes and bigger things that aren't really need to be shown. And the idea of it is that he can take a drawer out of any tier and move it to the top, and then put the top drawer down where that space was. And so the interchangeability of the drawers is very much of a challenge as a maker. And I like the idea that he can move the drawers around and show the collection, let's say, as I said, in drawer number 4 at the top for as long as he wants, and then he can put that back. Or he can rearrange things. I don't know what he's going to do. Originally, this was going to be on casters, which I told the client I think it was a bad idea, so we got rid of that. So those are drawn in there, but they're no longer there. And I did a bunch of decorative things, which I'll show you. But this is where the drawing that I actually worked from. And this is a drawing that's probably like 4 or 5 iterations from where I started. I had a basic idea of how long and how high, etc. And then I kept on using this yellow tracing paper, which I like, on top of the old drawing, and then keeping on to refine it and saying, okay, this looks better, and keeping on going. So next. I see a question about wood choices. Let me, when I show you the piece, I'll talk about that. Next, please.
There we go.
So this is a side view of the end view. Now, when you see Pahele, you will understand where this is coming from. These are slats. You also have seen me do this coopering. This is really kind of a variation on that, you might say. But I'm also knowing that this piece is going to a very humid coastal climate. And it's coming out of my shop. Now we're having rain right now, but we've had some moisture, and we're into June, which gets quite hot and quite different than where you live. I remember I went out to Port Townsend one July, and I couldn't believe how cold it was. I didn't want to have a huge amount of wood problems, humidity problems of swelling the wood. So these slats have a teeny space between them now, and they will swell and be tight to each other in time. So I had to know that I've got 24 inches there, whatever it is. I've got 7 slats, and I had to figure out how much of a space I needed to have to accommodate this going from one of the driest times of the year. This is a great time to build furniture during the winter months, but then you have to account for the fact that it's going to be hitting summer humidity and that kind of thing. And especially where this is going to go, where the annual humidity, the average humidity is 13% versus ours closer to 9 or 10%. And it's going to swell. So the slats, I had to figure that I had, let's say I had to have 3/16 of an inch or whatever. So I just divided it into 7 parts or 8 parts, whatever it is, because I've got the expansion up against the legs as well. Put little teeny spacers in there when I built it and put it together. And then the 4 little pins in the middle there are little square pins that are on the piece, and they lock those slats have large tenons on them, so that holds that piece in terms of no spreading is going to go on. And the back's put together the same way. Now there's a subtlety of this that I also did, which no one will ever know, except I'm going to tell you, is because I was running out of really incredibly straight-grained and beautiful walnut. This made out of walnut. That was their choice. I love walnut, and I had quite a bit at one point. I don't build too much with walnut, but I do. I was worried about again the expansion contraction, and I was running low on the really beautiful straight-grained stuff that I wanted. So I laminated almost all the slats. So it's got like an 1/8 or a 1/4 show face, and then the inside is lesser quality walnut. There's a lot of walnut I had that was sappy or more gray and unappealing. This is all air dried walnut, by the way, that I'm using, because that's pretty much what I do. I use air dried material, sawing it myself and drawing it. This I did not dry myself, but I did. It is native material. So when you laminate like that, you're cutting down the expansion contraction roughly in half. So I'm adding stability, I think, because these slats are not going to move quite so much dramatically from season to season as they might. So next. So there's a lot of technology that I understand about building furniture for so many years that hopefully I don't get into problems. This is probably a very hard drawing to look at and understand, but what they are is the corners and how the rails come into the corner, how I was setting up for the rabbit for the glass, and how I was going to build this. I could get into more detail as when I show the piece, but I'm thinking about, when I'm doing these drawings, about an efficient build, an accurate build, and to make it so that I can get to where I want to go without making mistakes or foolish mistakes. So the subtle things that I'm doing here that relate to the scale of pieces and that kind of thing, which again I can get into if there's interest. So next. I think there might be one more thing, and that's it.
I think that's the last one there.
Okay, so let me show you these pieces. But I know everybody's more curious about my shop. If you don't mind, I'm going to give you a quick tour of my shop. I wish it were sunny out and daylight as you have right now. But so I've got basic old machines, a big old jointer here. It's a pattern maker's joiner. It's a beautiful machine. It's just an 8-inch head. I've got a big bandsaw, which I use a lot. It's a really important tool for me. It's a bandsaw from 1943. Still Northfield, still being made today. Wonderful, wonderful machine, very stable. You can put a dime on edge on it and run it, and it doesn't fall over. That tells you something right there. I've replaced the bearings. I've got a Wadkin Burrs Green table saw. This is the only tool I bought new. It's a beautiful English saw with big cast iron tables and a big fence. I don't do a lot of sheet goods, so I don't really get set up for that kind of thing. I've got a Powermatic planer, an 18-inch planer. It's a beautiful machine. You can see I don't have dust collection. It just goes shooting out the end. And I'm not doing so much planing these days that it's a problem. Someday I always said I was going to get dust collection. And in the back of my shop here, I've got a Mortiser. This is a machine I built. This is a really incredible machine. It's got a right and left throw to the table, and it's got an in and out throw to the table. So I can put a bit in the my router here, move it up and down to register it right or left, and I've got stops, and I can do mortises in 10 seconds that are just really incredible with a router bit, different size router bits. I'm not exaggerating. 10 seconds or 15 seconds, you can do an amazing mortise when you learn how to use it. I've got a little lathe, and then under here is a little machinist lathe, which I use for some tool work and that kind of thing. So I've got lots and lots and lots of drawers in the shop. I've got over 100 drawers full of all different kinds of things. So let's walk over here and I'll show you Pahele. I'll start in from the back here because this is a view that you won't see normally. So this is a desk for a young man. So I started thinking about what does a desk for a young man mean? What do you want a desk to be in the next 20, 30, 40 years? Hopefully you will have it. So it's walnut. It's again, some beautiful dark walnut that I've had. And then butternut, which is another favorite wood of mine. The drawers are butternut. And I'm going to put my iPad on an easel here and try and give you a little bit of a tour of it. So I thought what it could be would be a piece that had multi-purpose to it. So if even you can't see me, it doesn't matter. So I think that the surface of the top is a place that you can stand and work. He's got drawers back here he can use. He's got drawers he can use here if he wants. It could be a serving piece in a small apartment. It could be a place he could put photographs of his parents or meaningful things or whatever it is. So it's sort of a multi-purpose piece. It's asymmetric. I said I'm trying to play with asymmetry. all the drawers are laminated. Let me show you. This is a typical drawer that I make. And why is it laminated? Because it's a curve. So that could have been cut out of the solid, I grant you. But the fact that I laminated it allowed me to put the facade of all those 5 drawers, or those 7 drawers, the facade, all the same piece. So it's really nice consistency. I put on the knobs, a little wedge there, as you can see, they never will turn or come off. The bottoms, I was playing with it. Each one's a different. This happens to be red cedar. And this is very typical of the way I build it, with beveled bottoms that come together beautifully at the corner, really cleanly done. Cut, all these surfaces are cut with a plane. I don't really do any sanding. Everything's chamfered. And these are kind of strange, the way they go in and out. They don't go the way you expect. This is one of the woods from your neck of the woods, which I absolutely love, Engelmann spruce. It's really a very, very, very favorite wood. Again, because it's got this beautiful, great sheen to it and tight grain. So exploring it further, the secret compartments in there, obviously, which I show you. So I'm thinking a timbre. You got to have a timbre somewhere, and then someday this might be fitted out. I did not do this in this phase, but this all comes out and can be fitted out. These are 3 of the little secret drawers that are just in here now because it's come back from a show and I didn't want to put them in until my clients are arriving next month to pick it up. And so you can have whatever you want in there. And this timbre was just fun. I decorated it with different things. And then this is a slide out work surface. So I conceive of him sitting here and working at this with a little laptop or a tablet or something like that. And this is actually a very interesting problem. How do you build something that will take the wear and tear that it's going to probably have? I don't think someone can sit on it because the desk will fall over, but it's really got to be strong. It's got to be stable. That piece can't, start to warp. And then you got some added drawers down here. So I can't actually lead you through all the ins and outs of the secret compartments, but I could tell you, and see it, that inside this compartment is one of the secret compartments. Now, you can't see anything in there. You just see, and you can feel in here all kinds of places, and you don't see anything. Nothing moves. There's no cracks or whatever it is. But if you reach up, underneath here, you can pull a little latch and that side opens up. But you have no idea that it's there because the drawer runner, the drawer guide just happens at the top where that opens. And that whole piece is one piece, and the whole side there is all one piece, and it's all, a one piece of grain. So, you might know there's something in there, but it's maybe because it's a little bit of an odd space here that I had to do so that drawer had some depth to it. So then come back to the slat idea, which I was talking about relating to the knife table. Here's the slats that I'm forming this out of. And I'm doing more than just slats. I'm also making them sort of a decorative idea. There's sort of a play of the darker bands that happen in the wood naturally with the lighter areas. And you see the square pins, and you see this ebony bead running along the bottom there just to highlight that. And this was a piece that was interesting to build. You couldn't just sort of build one part and build another part and then sort of add it together. And it had to be done by actually setting the legs up in space and starting to get angles between them. I did a full scale drawing from the top, but I needed to actually start to sort of set the legs up and sort of figure out, okay, this is the way that leg sets, and how do you join it together? And those rails, those walnut rails at the bottom there are laminated. So here you see I'm playing with some abalone and Morse code, holly and ebony, and just having fun. My client said, just have fun with it. So I can entertain questions towards the end, but let me move on here and talk about this piece, which is very close to being done. I just put a final coat of varnish on it yesterday. I used shellac for like 95% of a finish. And then I finally end up with shellac, with a varnish. So here this has been in the light, and you see how dark. I wish there was even better light in here. Let me see if the other end's any better. You can see it's got really rich, the color, as the drawers are not. The drawers have basically been finished recently. So the glass top happens right in there, as you can imagine. And I did an abalone band all the way around, and this man's initials, which I really didn't want to do, but I decided to do it. But I love the abalone. I love the way it sparkles and it draws it around, and it sort of will highlight the edge of the glass all the way around. And then the drawers are pretty straightforward little drawers. There's no bottoms in them right now, but they'll have black felt. Everything's dovetailed together. It's all the same dovetails. And it's enough to store about 25 or so knives each drawer. And the interesting challenge that, as I said, was that each drawer can come out and fit into a different space, which is, really a really nice feature, so that he can move his collection around. And then when you look down through the glass, all you're going to see is that drawer, but you don't even see the drawer so much. You see it now because, you've got so much distraction underneath there, but you're not going to be able to see that much. The drawer sides are sort of tucked in behind the rails and that kind of thing. What you're seeing there is the drawer bottom. One of my also favorite woods is aspen. The same thing as my floor, by the way, as I'm walking around on here. This is a very inexpensive but absolutely beautiful wood. A bear to work in some cases. This happens to be quarter sawn and figured, but it makes beautiful drawer bottoms for those drawers. So I've got dividers to go in. You can see I've set up a little rabbit in the back there, a little joint for them. Each one's numbered. And it's got fairly, straightforward lines. It's not an incredible groundbreaking design here. It's got tapered legs but the program was to try to make a really nice place for his collection. And what I also realized over time is that what you see now is sort of distinct, different pieces of wood forming the drawer fronts. In time, they will meld together to a much more golden color, just like the way the ends have in the light. So I'm going to come back to my bench and set up here and try to talk about more the nitty gritty here of how to get started on these designs. Wait a minute, I've got to figure out how to do this here. Sorry, upside down. So let's go to Pahele. And this is a little scale model. I don't often do that, but I made a little scale model of this piece. I wanted to work out what the top was going to be looking like. I wanted to work out what the facade might be like, what this pull-out slide would be like, and the shape of the legs, and the stance and the scale and everything about the piece is really very close to what I ended up building. This is a situation where a drawing would help me, but a full scale, a little model here really helped a lot more. Specifically, like the drawers in this area, I needed somewhat of a square section there to put them in. So I realized I had to have sort of a little more of a square corner on that side than I would have normally wanted to have. And then I started thinking about where the drawers are going to be in the back and how that would work. Even though this is just a piece of hemlock and just did it quickly, I got a real sense of what I was building. This little piece that I showed you, I didn't tell you the name, is called Pleated. It has the same kinds of shapes going, same kind of thing going on. It had so much shape that I really had to build a little model of it to get a sense of really what it would be like. And the little stance of the legs and the little pleat of the back, it really does sort of hold together of what that piece was like. And when I was building the pleat, the little one, I did something I don't normally do, which is to build a little bigger scale part. So this is really just a corner. This is a corner leg. It's actually the right corner looking at it. This happens to be the door right here. And this is the pleats. Well, look at something that you might or might not be able to see here. Maybe if I had 4 hands, I could show you. But this shape turns in space. This turns in space as they go down. Why is that? Well, that's something I wouldn't have realized unless I built this model. But what I was trying to do was to create some taper in the case. And if I could push this corner back, the staves would start to go back in space. Sounds like a complicated concept, but it's true. And then I try to fool around with the coves a little bit here to see what they would be like. But that leg, which when you look at it, you never would know that it's twisted in space, makes a huge difference to do that in terms of how it starts to create this tapered shape that I was looking for. So the little scale model like this took some time, but it was easy, really helped me a lot. This is also another little mock-up that I made to see how some of these different ideas were going to work out. So here it is, little beads inset into these staves. This has to be Doug fir again. I love Doug fir. You guys have some beautiful woods out there, and Doug fir is certainly a high in my list, along with red cedar and Engelmann spruce. And here's the little coves, and I'm playing with the idea of what does this look like when you start to do it. And I just sent off a piece to Center for Furniture Craftsmanship. I've been teaching there for 24 or 5 years now, and there's a faculty show every year. And I just sent off a walnut curved cabinet, quite small, with this same shape. And it's really was a real bear to build because it was out of Claro walnut, which is California walnut. And it was really figured and very difficult to use. So I showed you the drawings. I didn't have any full-scale drawings that I thought I would be appropriate to show you tonight because they're just too big. But often what I'll do is I'll make parts of something to try out the ideas, and I make patterns. So this is a pattern for the desk leg. And often the patterns get quite a lot of information on them. They might have where the toe happens to be, where it starts, and it might be where the joinery is, and have all the different information that one would need to build that. And if we could turn this camera around and go back to the piece, you could put this up against the leg that exists, and you'd realize that in the front view and in the side view, it's what I built it to. So the pattern informed me, and I'm building the pattern. I'm looking at it from a distance. I'm coming into my shop the next morning and looking at it and saying, oh, I think I like that, and I can go with it. And if not, I start another one. These are other patterns that did or did not work out to be anything. These happen to be curved legs, which is a little more interesting to show you than just a tapered leg. But they're all trying out the ideas of, how does this work in space? I'd like to stand this up, but you really can't see it that well if I did it because it's the camera's horizontal. So patterns are very, very important to me. It's what I have as a record of the piece when I'm done, and more importantly, it's part of the building process. I also will build samples of things. So here's a couple of legs that when I was doing more of that sort of thing, here's one where I tried a little toe of, I don't know what this is, Macassar ebony, I guess. And by the way, I cannot feel that if I close my eyes, I really can't feel what that joint is. And I'm just trying to show the taper of this leg and what the toe might look like. This is something I could take to a client and show, here's the joinery, and here's what I'm going to do. Or I might say, hey, here's a panel idea. What do you think about it? You like the idea of that crotch, and you like the black and whites, and then here's a little cuff down there, and these are a couple of ideas. It'd be so simple to send something like this through the mail to a client, not that they always understand it, and say, hey, here's a couple of little banding ideas. Which one do you like? And I doubt I actually did that. I think I did it more because I was experimenting with those bandings and seeing if I liked them. So patterns are important, making little mock-ups of something. And this is something that I did send to a client. This happens to be a sort of a cutoff, you might say, of a big mahogany dining table. I gave the client satin wood, figured maple, and I gave different kinds of inner bandings. I did a little different edge. Here's a roundish edge. Here's more of a flat edge. Here's the under bevel. And someone who doesn't know, here's the thickness of the top. Someone that doesn't know a lot about woodworking or about design or whatever could look at that and immediately kind of relate to the piece. And it's often been a big selling point to, to clinch the deal, so to speak. I was asked to do come in and do a presentation to a library in Maine. I came in with a piece of the table that they asked for in the corner, a corner of the table with the rails and the joinery and the details and the scale. And I walked out with a commission. So I do little samples all the time of little things so I can show people little lines of abalone, little wiggly lines, little inlays, and stuff like that. This is a really effective tool to show somebody, what I've done without showing them the piece, because sometimes the piece is, well, almost always the piece is gone. And here something that I did show to a client recently. I showed it to the client where I did the abalone. There's the scale of what I used there. I was going to do some wavy lines, and because it is a seaside house, she said no. I'm figuring out the scale here, and can I do it? And how hard is this to do? So this is sort of the preliminary stuff. If I'm going to design something, can I pull it off? So I would say that other than demonstrate a detail, which I'd be glad to do, you have to tell me whether we have enough time. I'd like to answer your questions. Someone asked about the wood, and I don't know exactly what the question was, but the wood is not necessarily the primary focus. I'm going to come back here, and it's not the primary focus for me when I'm building a piece. In other words, it's not like I start out and I say, I'm going to build with this wood, and what does the design say about that? It's more, I'm thinking about the design, and then what is the wood, how can the wood enhance that, or can it enhance that? And I have a preference. I like the native woods. I've done a lot of things out of cherry over the years, although I didn't show you very much. I love all the figured maples and figured birch, as I said. But there's so many different kinds of woods that we have that I tend to choose things that work to benefit the design. I don't want to necessarily go wild wood where I've got a design where I'm sculptural and I'm trying to create space, create a certain shape and that kind of thing. I don't want the wood to be conflicting with it. But if there's a panel somewhere, or with the satin wood band across Vava Vienna, that tall Macassar ebony piece with a painting on it, that makes sense to me to start to use something that's got some flash some places, but not overwhelmingly. And I think about it in terms of choosing woods for my designs. Have one or two, maybe at the most 3 major woods. 2 is probably better than 3. And then you can have, small amounts of other woods, but don't, do a piece out of 5 or 6 different kinds of woods. At least I don't think, because you start to overwhelm the viewer and there's just too many things going on. Okay, I would say, unless you want to see a quick detail, which I can do in probably 10 minutes, I'll open it up to questions, and I'll do the best I can to try and illustrate my answers.
Garrett, we have a few questions that came in over the chat. So I think what I'll do is just go ahead and call on the people that sent the chat, and they can ask their question verbally, and it's a little easier that way. Does that sound okay?
Okay. Yeah, fine.
Okay, George Newton, you want to kick it off? You had a couple of different questions about the expansion and contraction, et cetera, et cetera. You right there, George?
I'm here. You got me?
Got it.
Okay. In the piece where you had the inset small drawer in the lower corner, how do you accommodate expansion contraction at the point where those two boxes are joined? It's a fine line.
Now, George, I'm sorry, my volume was down too low. Which piece are you talking about?
Sorry, way back at the beginning, there was
Yes.
a drawer that had a small inset drawer.
Oh,
in the
okay.
lower
Yep.
corner.
Yep.
So
Yep.
how do you adjust for the expansion contraction of the two different size drawers with the joinery?
Okay. Well, the joinery, you don't have to worry about it because in drawers, they're sort of self-supporting, you know, the dovetails, everything's the grains all going in the same direction, basically. It's just, you're worried about, you know, maybe one expanding more than the other or other things could go on in there. Really, there's not an issue there because they all are, it is built into a drawer. The grains all going in the same linear direction, you know, horizontally in that case. That's not a place where the expansion contraction really is an issue. And plus the fact, when you get down to something that's 2.5 or 3 inches or whatever, I mean, you really can almost ignore the expansion contraction.
And if you're talking about quarter sawn materials,
Yes.
they're very stable. So
Yeah,
that's
I mean, but
critical in the process is choose quarter sawn materials for parts like that have.
well, you can't always get quarter sawn material. You have to, you know, do the best you can. But the quarter sawn material relates to what I was talking about. Is that linear grain that I happen to love a lot that you get with quarter sawn. You know, you get the grain like an Engelmann spruce bottom I showed you. You know, that's extraordinary the way that works. So, and here this piece, the quarter sawn grain, although it's not quarter sawn, is very, very important. That linear aspect of this is exactly what I'm building.
Yep.
So I'm looking for that. If I had wiggly grain here, then I'd be sort of working against my process. So expansion and contraction is really important. We've got to be thinking about it. I just moved out of the shop here about 3 weeks ago, a table that had a 54-inch wide top, 8 feet long with breadboard ends. And that moves somewhere around 5/8 of an inch between the wettest months of the year and the driest months of the year, or this, you know, that cycle. And I had to calculate it scientifically with Bruce Hoadley's book and, you know, approximate what the grain was and how dry it was and what the moisture content of where it was going to go. And I did the best I could, but I definitely left extra. Those the breadboard ends can expand a little bit more and they can shrink a little bit more. And the shrinkage is really the key. If the top can't shrink against the breadboard ends, then it's going to crack. If it needs to expand, it's probably going to break something if it really has to.
It's bad in both ways.
Yeah, but so you don't want that to happen. And I don't like to get called back for things. And knock on wood, I've never been called back because a drawer is sticking or something's wrong. Maybe because people are nervous to call me back. But I say, you've got a lifetime guarantee. As long as I'm alive, I will fix the piece. And I've never been called back. I build the best I possibly can. I use I choose appropriate materials. And when I made that huge mahogany table, I made it out of mahogany for a reason, because I did this decorative band all the way around. And you're not going to do that out of cherry. You're not going to do that out of maple. You're going to have problems. But mahogany is so incredibly stable, you can do it. I did a big table out of butternut. That's another one. Very, very, very stable wood. So, you know, I'm thinking about that. I don't want to have problems down the road.
Quarter sawn wood is the most stable.
Yes.
And yet within that realm, there are species of wood that are more stable than others.
Yes.
So if it is a really tight, tolerant situation, you need to pick the right wood or suggest the right wood for the client.
Or you've got to come up with a design that accommodates the situation that you're trying to build. In other words, I talked about those slats on the knife table. I know they're gonna, that's a lot of expansion. 24 inches is a lot of expansion.
Yep.
And it's gotta move. And I just wanted to keep it to a minimum by laminating them. I hope you understand, I laminated together facade piece and the inside piece, which you don't see. So I wanted to cut down the expansion contraction somewhat in that. I don't think it probably cuts it down to half. In a lamination of 4 or 5 laminations, it cuts it way down. So those drawer faces for Pahele that are laminated, they have very little expansion contraction because it's a very stable wood and it's laminated. It has less than half the expansion of, let's say, a cherry, a drawer face, let's say. So I think a lot about it because we are doing engineering. We are doing, that sort of thing as every piece we build. This big table, by the way, had 4 big drawers cut into the aprons. The 2 long aprons on either side had 4 24-inch drawers cut into it. No, sorry, 2 on each side. So you've got these huge holes you've cut into your apron, which is your main structure from one end to the other. You got to build it back in some way. And I didn't say this, but my background is as an engineer. I studied architecture and engineering back in the 70s at Princeton. I got a degree in that. And it's still, everything I think about is part of that. You're designing a chair. It's engineering. It's comfort, but it's engineering.
And yet it's subjective because
Yes.
the atmosphere does what it does. Humidity does what it does, and it's variable, not predictable. There are there are tables that will tell you where you're most likely to succeed, but there still is a fudge factor.
Yeah, Bruce Hoadley's book is very good, Understanding Wood. No, but it's why, like, all these pieces that were made in England that were imported here, they're still being imported probably, they all shrink and they all crack up. And I've had some in here to repair. Edward Barnsley pieces, who he was an extraordinary maker, but he didn't expect his piece to go to a dry environment in the New World.
They didn't have air conditioning.
No, and that dries things out.
Which is a dehumidifier that sucks all of the moisture out of the wood.
Yeah, I can't imagine you need air conditioning where you are.
Oh, once in a while.
2 days a year.
Yeah, how about that? Thank you, Garrett. Thank
you. I love where you are out there.
We do too. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, George.
Please come back.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? There must be more questions.
Oh yeah, David, do you want to talk a little bit about the grain choices you were mentioning?
You sort of answered my question already, but Mike, I was just pondering if you have a piece where you're going to move the drawers around, how do you pick the wood grain in that you can never know where the drawers are going to be? And so you're not going to have some sort of flow from drawer to drawer. And I was curious about your choices. And then you showed the piece. And it looks like you picked wood that was as uniform as you could find it in your shop. That's my guess. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's all the same tree and it's all from 2 boards. And explain that to me why. I mean, basically the piece is made out of 3 pieces. A piece of 8/4, the legs came out of, and then 2 boards. They were about 12 inches by 8 feet long. And that made all the slats, all the rails, and the drawer faces. And yet, you do woodwork at any amount of time, you realize that a piece of wood, every piece of wood is unique, and the grain and color changes dramatically through a width of a board. So I did the best I could, but I also believe that the finish and the oxidation and things will meld together. I did the best I could, but I think in time, there's always going to be variation, but in time, I think they will meld together and it'll be less of an obvious thing. It looks obvious to me now that they're each individual drawer is an individual piece of wood. I hope in the end it becomes more of a facade of color and by the way, there's little rosewood knobs that go on the front of each one of them. I've turned all those. They're Brazilian rosewood. They're all finished and ready to go. They're going to go on soon, and they have a little slot cut in them if you can see it. Yeah, you see the slot. for little wedges, which I was making today.
Yes.
This is what Brazilian rosewood looks like over time. So those knobs are going to be a lot darker someday. Why is Brazilian rosewood? I have some scraps of Brazilian rosewood that I've been waiting to do something with, and I thought this is a perfect project for it.
And the slots with the wedges, that's how they're held in, nothing else, huh?
Glue, but
Well,
basically making a dovetail on the inside. You know, it goes through and dovetails out. Sometimes I make a little expansion of the hole on the inside, make it slightly oval so that when it opens up, it's even got more space to go into. But if in wood like walnut, it doesn't take an awful lot. You know, it'll make some space for it. It'll compress a little bit. No, I've never had a knob come off that way. I've had people break knobs. If you turn too small a tenon, they can break it. That's the 5/16 tenon there, I think, something in that range. You know, if you can break them off, but you know, you make them out of a tough tropical wood most often, and generally that's not a problem. They have to be a lot smaller than that, and has to really take a direct hit for it to break. And you just drill it out and put another one in.
nice. Hey, Bob Pavia, you had, and actually I'm interested in this too, about the abalone inlay.
Yeah.
You want to?
I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how you do that, and particularly the curved channels that you use. Are you just freehanding those, or?
No, I'm not. Let me go get something and I'll show you this. It's interesting.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson.
I might need to go to a different view here to show you, because I think this camera is not as good as this camera. So here is what I cut the abalone out of. Okay, you get a sense of what I'm working with. Okay, now you can go to Guitar Supply and you can buy pieces of abalone, but it doesn't matter. You still got to start somewhere. And then this is a little box of pieces, and these are what were left over. I'm going to dump this out. Hang on a second. I'm putting you down so I can dump it out with the one hand. So these are the pieces that I sawed, and they're of varying quality. So they start out like these, and then you saw them into, you know, little strips. So that's what I'm working with. And needless to say, they're small and they need to be regular. And I don't know why, but all these, you know, this is about a typical one down here that I'm looking for. This is about the size that I used. Now that one's shattered. They sometimes shatter because sometimes they're not strong enough. So I saw them in a little miter box. I think this is what I used for that one. I've got a lot of little ones. And basically you put the shell like that and you saw it. Don't use your good dovetail saw, use something else. But I do use a little saw. And to make the grooves, I do all my inlay, as this is example, with little cutters that make a very, very fine, accurate groove. And they look like there's a little inlay cutter right there. It's on the upside. It's upside down. I'm not using it. I'm using the other side anyway. On my right, and the side you can't see. But that's a little inlay cutter. And to do the inlay for the size that I wanted for this particular project, I made this, and that sized it perfectly. So once I made a groove, then I could go around this by hand and do that. I could make them exactly the size all the way around that I needed a little bit bigger than all my cutters were. And when you get to the curves, then I'm working against the pattern. And I'm still trying to figure out how to do it really, really well. I've done curves for a long time, but I wouldn't say that I always end up with the most clean, perfect grooves, although they look pretty perfect. But if you get down there with a magnifying glass, you know, you can see those little variations there. See those little gaps in there. Those are little defects that happen. But you know, I use super glue that fills it in. But those are against the pattern. So you could essentially, you imagine you had a pattern, you could go against the pattern and create those grooves with aids of maybe using a knife to help along, or, you know, little chisels or whatever it is. But I mean, that would be a whole weekend class to try and talk about abalone. But any of those materials, or wood, is a lot easier. The abalone is you probably know, is a tough, brittle material. So I have lots of little, you know, lines that I've sawed that never worked, and you know, there's some that are 0.5 millimeter in here, and sometimes I'll just use them and make them work. So you just plug away at it, and I think it's a lot of work, but it's a beautiful material. And just, I mean, look how beautiful some of these pieces are. And well, maybe these don't show up very beautifully, but let me go back to the piece, because the piece does have a lot of beautiful color, and see, there's some green along this whole edge, and there's more green in the front, and then there's pink over here. It's really beautiful, I think. Doesn't look very pink tonight, but it's really pink in the daylight. So I just, you know, it's you don't see people doing it. That's why I guess I like it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to explain it, but you know, or do an article about it, but most people, it's a little beyond most people's interest, I think. Any more questions?
Interest or ability.
Yeah. Well, you know, basically,
that.
all the inlay stuff is you're making a groove and filling it, or you're making a piece and making a space for it. Either method, A or B. And this is one where you make a groove and then you make pieces as close as you can that are going to go in and not break. You have to break them if they go around a curve. Obviously, you break it as you go around. But in this case, you're just trying to get it in there without any damage. And sometimes they do break unintentionally, or the end isn't good or whatever. So I use a little file and a little saw, and I made probably 120% of what I needed, and I worked out. And it was a lot of sawing. I was sawing for several days. Now, I don't work for 8 hours. I work for 4 or 5 or 6.
Amazing. I think we have one, well, maybe 2 more. I believe you answered this at one point already, Garrett. Was the book, was that Understanding Wood? Was that the one about the wood expansion?
Yes, by Bruce Hoadley. He wrote 2 books, Identifying Wood and Understanding Wood. Understanding Wood really goes into the whole technology of why does wood expand, and how do you dry wood, and all the sort of nitty gritty of the engineering of wood, you might say. Not specifically, the difference in species so much, but there is some of that. So if you want to know the expansion contraction of a species, you have to know the radial or the tangential expansion of it, and that's a figure. And by the way, that's different. If it's flat sawn versus radial sawn, quarter sawn, there's a big difference there in how they move, and that's all part of what you could plug into a formula to understand roughly, let's say, how big a 54-inch wide cherry top is going to move. So you have some basis. Even more useful than that, though, for you particularly in your shop, you specifically in your shop, is I've got a wide board. I've got several wide boards in my shop, 14, 16 inches wide, some 24. And I've had them in there for years. They're some are offcuts from bigger tables and things like that. And I write on it regularly how wide they are. I don't do it so much anymore because I don't need to, but how long or wide are these? Is it 16? Is it 16 and a 16th? Is it 16 and a 32nd? What it is? And I write the date. So when I'm fitting a drawer next well, let's say I'm fitting a drawer in July 5th, I can know, well, July 5th, in this sine curve of expansion contraction, we're at 40% expanded. We really haven't, well, maybe it's 60% expanded. We haven't certainly got to the most expanded by any means. We could get that in September, maybe October, but where are we? So I'm fitting a drawer. I need to know, well, I'm somewhere between the two, or like that breadboard end, I'm somewhere in there, but where am I? Am I 30% expanded fully, or am I 60% fully expanded? So that informs how I would fit that breadboard end, or how I fit drawers and that kind of thing. So all these drawers in this piece are fit for this time of year. And I'm expecting that these are the most contracted they will be in their lifetime going forward, unless air conditioning does a lot more drawing out of something that I'm aware of, and I think it does. I had a piece come back from a show where it was air conditioned, and I was shocked by how much drier it was. And it was built in my shop the previous winter, and I'd fit everything for, expecting to be a normal life. And it was in this air conditioned space for about 2 months, and it came back really, really, really dry.
Greg, do you want to hit us up with the last question for tonight?
Yeah, I was just curious if you have some tips and tricks or regarding the wavy panels on the sunlight on water idea, how you do those curved veneers.
Well, I do a lot of laminating, because I really think I do a lot of curves, and lamination is a direct route into those curves. So I have a 3-dimensional form that I'm bending those layers on. Now, if you want to wait 1 second, I will go show you the actual offcut from that piece. This is the offcut from Wakiwa Shimmering. Now, I don't know if this camera can pick it up or not, but that is about 20 some layers. I'm not seeing it all that great in my camera, but you get a sense that there's a lot of layers there. Okay, this one's easier to read. This is Ripplicious. And this is bending ply. Because it was such a big space and it was less structural, I was able to use bending ply, and then there's the veneer of pear that I put on the outside. So you get this rippling shape with this straight grained veneer, but yet it has this, shape that it creates. And I also learned that one of the things that's nice about this is, the sort of the natural shape of this, it doesn't have to be any sort of repetition. You get big waves and small waves and that kind of thing. You get some wide troughs and that kind of thing. And it's just, it's very organic in terms of just playing with it, but it's a 3-dimensional form, and I'm bending these things over the form to create the shape. And one of the tricks that I've learned to try to be efficient is you can use a form right to left and left to right. In other words, you can make a piece where the shape goes left to right, and then flip it over, and you can go left to right, right to left on the other side. Not that you're trying to make them balance, but you've got 2 different shapes out of the same form.
Mm-hmm.
Or you use only part of it. Now the next piece I'm gonna build is gonna be a table with some ripples in it. And I'm gonna go look at one of my forms that I have, and I'm gonna reuse it. Why not?
All right.
So, yeah. So this was a much more challenging bend, but it's at least 20 layers. I might be 25 layers, this little guy. This is Wakiwa Shimmering. That's what the side of that looked like. And that's all I have left, by the way. That's, this little teeny offcut. I don't make a lot of extra. That's a little closer than I wanted to be.
Well, I think that's it for tonight. Thank you very much. A very interesting presentation.
Thank you. I enjoy it.
we've been doing a little challenge, I guess, on doing things where you're stretching your limits a bit. It sounds like you do that pretty well. To us, it would be stretching our limits, maybe not to you, but a lot of ideas there that I think most of us have never tried.
Well, you know, I didn't wake up yesterday and this morning rather than say, oh, you know, I know how to do this. You've got to experiment, and you've got to, you know, at some point you get enough of a basis about wood and tools and techniques that you feel comfortable with, that you start to experiment, and start, when you experiment, you say, oh, well, I could do that, and then you can go in that direction, and you keep on going. So, you know, it's additive. I say woodworking is additive for sure. So, you know, it's a lot of experience behind me at this point, but it's also, I'm still having a lot of fun. You know, I could spend all day just farming, which I love a lot, but the woodworking still draws me in here every day. And as long as you're having fun and you think you're, you know, experimenting and doing new things, then go for it. I mean, that's all you ask for. And success.
Very good. Well, thanks again. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
I appreciate you inviting me.
We'll do it again.
Okay, yeah, because I talked to your group in person, I think at least twice, but maybe it'll happen again.
Yeah.
All right.
Next time you're at Port Townsend, maybe we'll be back in person again.
Yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen with Port Townsend, but maybe we'll go back. We love it. We absolutely love it going there. Thanks a lot, Greg and King and the whole rest of you.